Hi there. My name's Mary, and I'm the Director of Youth Services at the Portland Public Library in Portland, Maine. And we really are missing you, but we're enjoying doing our readings so that you can at least catch us if you join us here at YouTube at our channel. So what I'm doing today is I'm continuing our story. It's called Welcome to the Bed Biscuit. This book is by Joan Carris. It's illustrated by Noah Z. Jones. It was published by Candlewick Press, and it was published in 2006. Now, if you remember, Grandpa Bender went to help with a fire at a neighboring barn farm. And he came back with a package, and he put it in a box. So Millie, the kitten, is almost a year old, and Ernest, the pig, and Gabby, the minor bird, are all wondering what it is that Grandpa has. So we will continue with Chapter 4, A Gift of Moles. 2 days went by. Grandpa ran from the office to the house, back again. Ernest followed him upstairs once, even though he loathed steps like all pigs. He wanted to see exactly what was going on. Grandpa was feeding the tiny bundle, talking to it, holding it against his chest. He even hummed to it now and then. A baby for sure, thought Ernest, turning away, and still in Grandpa's room. Here, in our house. But Ernest told no one what he'd seen. Instead, he tried to pretend that nothing had changed. During this time, Millie sat on Ernest's bed and watched Grandpa come and go without her. The autumn days were growing cooler, but apparently he no longer needed his living cat scarf. After supper on the second day, Millie scooted out the pet door. She did not return until almost bedtime. Then, wet and bedraggled, with a dead mole clutched in her teeth, she pushed her way through the pet door. Inside, she laid the mole on the mat in front of the little door. She went back out, returning with another mole, which she arranged beside the first. "Good job," Ernest said. "Grandpa hates moles in the yard, and you got a double header." "Thank you," Millie said. "It's what cats do for their humans, and only cats do this as far as I know." "Right. I don't know any pigs who catch mice and moles for their humans." At bedtime, Grandpa appeared briefly in the kitchen, just long enough to say, "Night, troops. See you in the morning. Come on, Millie, bedtime." He snapped off the light and was gone. Ernest heard Millie's disappointed mew. "Now, Millie," he said, "Grandpa had no chance to even see those moles. Just wait till morning. And he did call you to come to bed, you know, just like last night." Millie sat like a statue. She didn't even blink. The next morning was the third one after the fire, and it started fast. The phone rang twice before Grandpa could even get downstairs. By then, the cows were bawling again. "Dang telephones," Grandpa said, dashing into the kitchen. "My grandparents lived in this farm and did fine without them. If you needed to ask somebody's advice, You rode over there on your horse. It was friendlier, and the folks always fed you something good. By this time, he was in his jacket with his red cap on his head. He jerked open the heavy door and clattered down the porch steps. The big old door simply brushed aside Milly's moles that lay on the mat. Now, Milly, Ernest began, but it was no good. Milly had seen everything. Those were full-grown moles, and Ernest knew she'd fought hard for them. They were special gifts, and they had been overlooked. Milly crept over to the pet door, picked up a mole, and pushed open the door. "Bad kitty," Gabby squawked after her. "You put that back where Grandpa can find it." Gabby kept on squawking. Milly ignored her as she returned, then left with the second mole. This time, she stayed outside. "Well, wouldn't that frost? Oh, put a sock in it," Ernest said. "I'm going to talk to Sherlock." Gabby's voice shrilled after him. "Bad pig! Bad pig!" At the kennels, Ernest flopped down on the other side of the fence from the sleeping blue-tick hound. "Guess I'll wait till he wakes up," Ernest thought. Sherlock's large, round nose twitched, then snuffled. He opened one eye. "Smelled you," he said. "Cleanest pig I ever met." "Of course, I have my own shower. Give any pig a shower, and he'll be just as clean as I am." Sherlock rippled his skin, stretched, and sat up inch by inch. "So why do pigs roll in mud?" "To keep the hot sun from burning us up. If we overheat, we die. Mud keeps us cool. Of course, a shower's better." "I hate baths. Did I tell you about my last coon hunt?" Ernest shook his head no, which was a lie. He'd heard this particular story many times, about how Sherlock had treed 6 coons all by himself in one night. But Ernest would listen again to be polite. It was important to keep the boarders happy. Grandpa often said that. After lunch that day, Grandpa did not just doze in his rocking chair. He took off his glasses and lay down on the couch in the family room next to the kitchen. Gabby flew in to check, came back to the kitchen. "Snoring," she said. "Out like a light." "Of course," came a small voice. "He's up at night, fussing with that baby." "Oh!" went Gabby. "Where are you?" "She's behind the stove," Ernest said. Now Milly oozed out from behind the wood stove, an enormous black stove that had been in Grandpa's family forever. It sat in the same place, angled in the corner, where air could circulate around it. No one cleaned behind it, because only bugs or a small animal could get back there. "Milly," Ernest said, "any day now, things will be back to normal around here. We just have to be patient." Milly sniffed. "Till then, I'll be behind the stove. It's a good place for thinking." She stood up and gave Ernest a lick on his head, almost like a farewell lick. She nodded at Gabby, who never permitted any licking from cats, and said, "I want to be alone. Nothing's the same anymore, and it makes me sad." Milly was behind the stove again, before Gabby or Ernest could reply. Chapter 5, Mad Millie. The next day, at breakfast, Grandpa called for Millie, but he was too busy to do more than call. When he left for the office, he set out food and water for her. This was barn cleaning day. Grandpa called it mucking out. As he finished mucking out a stall, Ernest nosed in piles of fresh straw. Ernest added a pail of fresh water, and they moved on to the next stall. Grandpa was not whistling. He always whistled when he was cleaning up stinky stuff, but not today. He went over to the house regularly, but he did not talk about it. That evening after supper, he put his head down on the table and began snoring. Up on her curtain rod, Gabby sang, "Rock-a-bye baby on treetop." Only an exhausted man could have slept through it. Ernest settled on his blankets and ordered his brain to get busy on their problem. He had talked to his brain other times, with excellent results. The idea was to relax, to let the mind operate at its own speed. Trusting in this, he stretched out and promptly fell asleep. After a short doze, Ernest woke up. Grandpa was still at the table, but now he was talking to himself. "No use hunting for her. She's avoiding me on purpose. So jealous she can't see. And all cats hate changes. Dang it, she's apt to run off." Elbows on his knees, Grandpa leaned over toward Ernest. "Have you seen Millie? I've looked everywhere. The food's still there, too." "Runk." Ernest went to rub against Grandpa's leg. "Go find her, Ernest. Please, find Millie." Like most pigs, Ernest could find things that humans or other animals couldn't. Just last week, his marvelous snout had found Grandpa's missing wallet under the seat in the pickup. But right now, Ernest knew Millie was hurt and hiding on purpose. Of course, Grandpa was hurting too. Ernest made up his mind. He had a duty to the family, and so he posed like a pointer at the back corner of the wood stove. The hanging lamp over the stove gave just enough light to reveal a furry golden ball in the dark corner. Gabby landed on Ernest's head and peered into the dimness. "Ah! Filthy!" Her eyes big, Millie went, "Tss." Grandpa knelt on creaky knees and looked behind the stove. "You did it, Ernest!" He reached one hand in toward his cat. "Millie girl, I sure miss you," he began. "Don't hide back there." No answer, only silence in the kitchen. Grandpa kept coaxing, but Millie did not move. And finally, he stood up. He put out fresh food and water close to the stove corner. He set Gabby on his finger, told her what a fine bird she was, and stroked her iridescent feathers. He patted Ernest for a long time. "Poor Millie," he said at last. "I guess I'll leave her alone for now. She's just being a cat, after all," said Ernest. "But you're my pig, thank goodness, and we understand each other." Grandpa was slow getting to the kitchen the next morning. He'd had only a sip of coffee when the phone rang. "Morning," he said. Then, "Oh, I'm fine, Annalie. Just too busy. If it gets any busier, I'll put you back on the payroll for after school, okay? How are you folks?" he went on. "I know. It'll take a long time to get over your loss. Fire's a terrible thing." Grandpa listened quite a while. "You're rebuilding. Right there. Well, hallelujah. Hallelujah, hallelujah," crowed Gabby, savoring the new word. Grandpa continued, more serious now. "Well, Annalie, it's been 5 days, you know. He's still in the incubator. I've had a new idea, but I'm not promising a thing." Ernest thought. "Our mystery baby is a he." Ernest saw the flick of Millie's marmalade tail at the back corner of the stove. "Incubator, incubator," Gabby sang. When Grandpa hung up the phone and left for milking, Ernest hurried over to the stove. "For corn's sake, Millie," he said, "come on out here. Grandpa's miserable without you." Ernest went on urging her to use her head, to think of Grandpa, to remember how folks in a family helped one another. When Millie did not reply, he gave up and went outdoors. Sherlock's lugubrious howl called him to the hound's pen. Ernest jogged right over. "Hi, how's it going?" "Awful slow," Sherlock said. "And that dust mop never shuts up. Whines all the time. Spoiled rotten." Ernest had been trying to ignore the yipping frou-frou, but it was impossible. "Maybe she's bored, like you," he suggested. "What if you told her some of your exciting stories about coon hunts? You could explain possum hunting, too. It would be a fine, educational way to pass the time." Sherlock's eyebrows lifted. "Well, if you think—" "Oh, I do," Ernest assured him. "And you'd be doing Grandpa, the whole place really, a real service by keeping her quiet." "Be more like a miracle," Sherlock observed, "but I'm happy to help out." He turned his attention to the Pekingese, and Ernest went on to the barn to help with milking. After breakfast, Grandpa said, "Gabby, Ernest, stay right where you are. I've got something to show you." He loped toward the stairs and was soon back, standing in the kitchen doorway. Ta-da! What do you think? It was up in the attic, left over from our last child. Grandpa was wearing a green flannel baby snuggler. Very handy, see? I can sit down to feed him wherever I am. He'll hear my heartbeat and be warm too. Gabby flew to Grandpa's shoulder. Ernest stood by Grandpa's feet and let his snout go to work. He thought, it's burned, all right. Okay, troops, no touching, but you can have a peek. Grandpa knelt so Ernest could see and opened the flap on the green snuggler. Chapter 6, Poor Little Guy. Quivering with curiosity, Ernest and Gabby gazed down into the baby snuggler. "It's a wee Scotty," whispered Grandpa, "like I had when I was a boy." Ernest saw a black, furry mite of a dog at the bottom of the snuggler. With its eyes closed and singed fur. It seemed more dead than alive. This thing hasn't a chance, thought Ernest. Grandpa shouldn't get his hopes up. Ernest sagged back onto his haunches. Gabby examined the puppy and gave a puzzled, "Awk." She looked from Grandpa to Ernest and back at Grandpa. Her beak tilted to one side. "I see you're not impressed," Grandpa said, "but this is a miracle here. We don't know how his mother got him out of the barn the day of the fire." Grandpa stood up, "And he won't make it unless he takes more formula. I sure wish his mama had lived to nurse him." "Aw," Ernest said softly, wishing yet again that he and Grandpa could talk. It was a pity humans had so little skill with languages. Grandpa took a tiny bottle out of the refrigerator and warmed it under hot running water. "Chow time, buddy." He settled into the kitchen's plaid, overstuffed chair with the puppy. Ernest glanced under the stove and watched Millie's thrashing tail. The clock ticked and Grandpa talked. "You're my wee Scotch laddie," he crooned to the pup. "A braw wee laddie for sure. And you're going to drink all this formula, aren't you?" Ernest thought. He never called me a braw wee laddie. Later that day, after chores were finished, Ernest trotted off to the barn alone. "I'm still waiting patiently," he told his brain as he selected apples from a feed bin. Gabby flew in and settled on the rim of the bin. "Wee laddie, wee laddie," she meant. "It's sickening. If I hear it one more time, I'm moving to the woods with the crows." Ernest stopped eating. Gabby hates those crows, he thought, just like I do. You wouldn't do that, would you? My, this morning they took more of my shiny stones," she said. "My shiny picture stones. They're always taking something." "You mean those stones under my shower?" "Those are my picture stones. I make beautiful designs with them. When I move to the woods, I'll find them and bring them back where they belong." Ernest said, "Those crows are tough and huge. You be careful." Gabby hopped to the barn floor and walked off, tail feathers high. "Well, I'm tough too, so I might go live with them, and I might not." Ernest watched her leave as he crunched his lost apple. Now both Millie and Gabby are mad, he thought, and Grandpa's grumpy because he's tired. Ernest went home for a shower. He stood under the soothing water a long time before going inside to dry off on his blankets. First, though, he checked behind the stove for Millie. "She's there," Grandpa said from his chair by the window. Poor little pussycat. I don't know where Gabby went. But look here, Ernest. Seems to me our laddie's perkier. He's taken more formula today." The pup quivered a little and tried to melt into Grandpa's chest, or so it seemed to Ernest. But he made no sound. "Poor wee Offen," Grandpa said. "Lost everything, didn't you? Right down to a few chimney bricks. But you're a miracle, laddie." Jealousy ate into Ernest's heart. Now he knew exactly how Millie and Gabby felt. It was a mean feeling. Of course, I was an orphan too. He thought back to the day he'd come to the Bed and Biscuit, tiny, cold, scared. His mother had died when he and his litter mates were only a week old. He barely remembered her, only that she had fed him often and kept him toasty warm. At the Bed and Biscuit, Grandpa had also fed him, wrapped him in blankets, and put him in a basket by the stove. Then one day, I went exploring, Ernest recalled happily. "Excuse me," Grandpa said, moving his leg. "I have to fix a mug of tea." Ernest hadn't realized he'd been leaning against Grandpa's leg. When Grandpa had his tea, he sat down again. He patted his leg so that Ernest would sit beside him. "Perhaps," Grandpa said thoughtfully, "we should call him Lucky." He looked inside the snuggler and bent over so that Ernest could see. The pup raised his head this time, but his eyes hadn't opened yet. His nose was dull, not shiny and healthy. Grandpa gazed fondly at the puppy. "I wish you'd make some kind of sound, fella. Any kind at all. Or did all that smoke ruin your bark? Maybe you're never going to bark for us. Is that it?" Ernest pressed against Grandpa's leg. "That dog isn't even trying to bark," Ernest thought. "His eyes aren't open either." Ernest recalled that Grandpa had said the pup was a preemie, born early. All of a sudden, Ernest thought, "Poor little guy. Of course Grandpa wants to save him and give him a home. It's just the kind of thing he would do. And poor Grandpa, because I don't think this orphan's going to make it." And that's where we'll end our reading today. We've been reading Welcome to the Bed and Biscuit by Joan Carris and illustrated by Noah Z. Jones. The book is published by Candlewick Press, and it was published in 2006. I hope you're enjoying the story, and we'll start reading again tomorrow, and we'll find out what happens to that little premature puppy in the green snuggler. So, again, my name is Mary. I'm the Director of Youth Services at the Portland Public Library in Portland, Maine. And I'm really glad that you were able to join us today. And until we meet again, bye-bye.